welcome back to my top 100 list. This time going through entries number 90 through 81. So for this list, the theme is now exotic themes, which is not something that always pops up among my favorite games. So let's get started. My number 90 is Aeon's End, which is new to the list. Its weight is about a 5 and plays 1 to 4 players. For this game, I just don't know where it's going to go. It is a game I have played several times. I have played it every time solo, but I've also found that I was doing a number of things wrong early on, and now that I've corrected them, I'm still not able to beat the game at its introductory setting, which is a bit of a problem considering that the game is supposed to be able to get like several degrees harder than it is in the current version that I'm playing. So I haven't actually unpacked all of the cards because I've been trying to beat the intro scenario before I do. But I've been essentially playing the game over and over again against the same set of available cards. It is a deck builder like Dominion, and unlike a lot of other deck builders, there is a set number of cards that are available to purchase at the beginning of the game, and those don't change, but you can change them from game to game. I just keep playing the same set. What makes it interesting is a couple of things, but most intriguing is that you don't ever actually shuffle your discard pile. So instead of shuffling it and it forming your new deck, you just literally flip it over and you start drawing from it, meaning the order in which you discard your cards affects how you're going to play in the future. It's a really intriguing element, and I think I like it better than Dominion, but I really need a win. I've played it, I think, a half dozen times and still not gotten close to win. Granted, about half of those times I was playing it wrong and making it too hard for myself, but I've really only gotten close once, and I just need to win it so I can start to see some of the other content and start to see some of the variety that the game has, because right now it feels a lot like I'm just kind of in a time loop or purgatory, repeating the same game over and over again, and yet I willingly continue to do it, which might be a mark of a really good game. So this could either shoot up my list dramatically or it could fall off entirely, but for now it's sticking at my number 90. That's Aeon's End. Just about forgot. Here's the game. So yes, I do own this one. This is the guy I can't beat. My number 89 is Camel Up, and I have the second edition. It is down 12 spots on my list. Its weight is about a 3 and will play anywhere from 3 to 8 players. And that's actually the first thing I want to highlight, because Camel Up, which was at one point confusingly not totally known whether it was supposed to be called Camel Up or Camel Cup, thanks to some creative presentation on the box of the first edition. Now it's decisively just called Camel Up. Camel Up is a game that suits 3 to 8 players basically equally well. I would have no issues with playing anywhere in that range, and I don't think you would either. It's a betting / racing game where you have 5 camels that are racing around the track, and depending on which camel you pick to finish each leg of the race, which is a certain number of dice have been rolled to move some of the camels, or to win or lose the overall race, or a couple of other ways you can play it in order to make some money. You're just trying to make as much money as possible by basically betting on the outcome and making the right tactical play to get as much money as possible, and then hoping the dice cooperate. It's very much luck-based, but it is also light enough that shouldn't bother you unless you specifically want a more strongly strategic game. If you're okay with something that's more light and casual, this is a great game. It's maybe a little bit more complex than some people might need for an introductory game. But if you think your audience is going to be able to handle this okay, it is a very accessible game that has cute camels stacking on each other and carrying each other across the track, and some dice rolling and some, stand up and cheer moments that are just delightful in this game. It's a really good game. It's probably only this low on my list because this is not normally the type of game that I seek, but it is excellent for the kind of game that it is. I can definitely recommend it very widely. It may cause some troubles with people who are new to games in the learning curve at the very beginning. but it's manageable, I think, for the vast majority of people as long as they're willing to be patient for a few minutes and just sit down and learn the game. Yeah, so that's my number 89, Camel Up. My number 88 is Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, which is down 13 spots from my previous list. Its weight is about a 7 and will play 2 to 6 players. Euphoria is a game in which I think I enjoy the theme more than I do the gameplay, but I still really like the gameplay. It is a dice worker placement game where you roll to see what you get, and then you can place those workers, which will have different effects depending on what number 1 through 6 each of the dice has on it. But you also have to watch out for having a collective roll that is above a certain threshold. I believe it's like 14 or so. Because if you roll your dice and they total past that threshold, you lose one of your workers because they become too smart and are like, oh, actually, everything is just really terrible. And I realize that now, and I'm just going to leave you. Bye-bye. Which is a really interesting balancing mechanism, considering that a lot of worker placement games have a problem where if there's a mechanism to get more workers, the optimal strategy is usually to have more workers than everybody else and be able to do more as a result. This one kind of balances that by the fact that if you have too many, you're very likely to lose some on an inopportune roll. The theme's really cool. The individual bits are really cool. This is, I believe, the first game designed by Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games, and I believe it's also attributed the design to Alan Stone as well. I like some of their games slightly better than this, but this is still a really good one. I just wish that, the truly impressive designs that I've seen them do had been done with this theme, because I really like the quasi almost spoof of 1984 kind of feel that this one portrays, and I do enjoy it every time I play it. It's a very good strategy game. It just doesn't maybe have as much depth as some of the other games that I have on my list. So that is my number 88, I believe, Euphoria. My number 87 is Set. It is up 2 places on my list. Its weight is a 1 and can play 1 to about 15 players. Set is a very simple game. It's a little tricky to explain, which is always something of a barrier for me if I want to try to use it as a sort of introductory game, because there are essentially 4 aspects to each card. There is the color, there is the shape, there is the fill, so either half, full, or empty, and then there is the quantity, 1, 2, or 3. Your job is to find a set of 3 cards in which those aspects are either, all 4 of those aspects are either all the same, or different, or all 3 different possibilities for that particular difference. That's about as clear as I can put it without physically showing you the cards. And you can probably see why it's a little tricky to explain, because it just doesn't intuitively register very easily just by verbally explaining it. But it is very simple once you get the main trick of the game, and then it's just a simple race to see how many sets you can identify. You point out 3 on the table, you have a set of 12 or 15 cards out, and you say, hey, are these 3 a set? They sure are. Take them. That's a point. Or 3 points. It doesn't really matter how you count it. And then keep going. Refill where you took those cards out, and keep going until you run out of the deck. That's it. Very, very simple. Again, it might be... Well, it doesn't feel like a party game. It is, I think, like a party game in the sense that it doesn't naturally bridge into other more complicated games. It doesn't teach you how to potentially play a Euro game or a thematic Ameritrash game, anything like that. So it's probably not a gateway game in the strictest definition. But it is very good and very easy to play. This is a game that I think does exist outside of traditional hobby gaming circles. So I think this is a game that you can find people who have played that have not played anything else, like not even a game like Catan. So it can be a nice bridge in that sense of, oh, here's something familiar that's good, and maybe we can then try something like Camel Up later on. So that is my number 87 set. My number 86 is Dixit, which is down 20 spots on my list. Its weight is a 1, and it would play 4 to about 12 players, although I have to give a bit of an asterisk there. You need a version of the game that supports more than 6 players. Not all versions of the game that you can buy actually do so. Dixit is another extremely simple game. I would call this game a party game. All you do is you have a set of cards that are these lovely illustrations that are kind of abstract. They aren't depicting real life or anything like that. They're depicting like fairy tale scenes and sort of weird conceptual turns and things like that. And one person around the table will say a story that describes that card. And everyone else will put in a card that matches that story as best they can. So if I put pumpernickels in, and I put in a card that clearly depicts a pumpernickel, that's bad. The reason, everyone will guess mine correctly, and I get no points if everyone guesses mine correctly. But if I put something in that clearly has nothing to do with pumpernickels, that is also bad for me, because at that point, I will also get no points, and everybody else will get points for putting in cards that were better pumpernickel cards than mine. So I had to find somewhere in between in giving a hint that sort of describes my card, but is vague enough that it will potentially describe other cards, because I will only get points if at least one person guesses mine correctly and at least one person guesses mine wrong. It's a very straightforward concept. I've essentially taught you 90% of the game just by explaining it. The artwork is fantastic. It is very playable. If you want to check it out, and if you're looking to buy it, I would recommend trying to get a version that plays upwards of 6 players if you can. That would be a set like Dixit Odyssey, I believe, has that in it, if you can find a copy of that. Whereas the box just labeled Dixit, I believe, does not have more than 6 players available. Yeah, it just works for everyone. It still has the issue of it's not going to bridge people into more sophisticated games, which was also true of Set. But I also feel like this is just a game that is so relaxing and so inviting that it's just good to have in your gaming vocabulary, even if it doesn't evolve into later, more complex games after that. So, highly recommend Dixit. It's really only down because I can only have so many games in my top 100. Check it out if you're looking for a simple game to play with just about anyone. That's number 86, Dixit. My number 85 is Innovation, which is up 6 spots. Its weight is about a 3, and will play between 2 to 4 players, although I've primarily played it at 2. This is the yellow version of the game, which looks far more presentable on average than the original version, and I believe which was by Asmati Games, if I'm remembering correctly. And I believe they have the game back, so if you're looking for it now, you're probably getting that version, and if you can survive the awful artwork, it's a great game. This is a game that is one of the few that I consistently lose at. I usually play it with my wife, Amanda, and I find that the problem is she just gets her engine running more efficiently than I ever do. I think I get lost in the weeds in the game. It's a card game where you can kind of get additional innovations that are labeled in decks 1 through 10, which represent different eras of technology. And so you might get writing in like one of the first 3 eras, and you might get like nuclear fission somewhere in like the 10th or 9th eras. And sometimes the powers make sense for what it is that the supposed innovation is, and sometimes they don't. which is fine. It is mostly just a card game where the meat of it is in the complexity of how all the gears fit together. There is a really sophisticated puzzle to play here. There is a high element of luck of the draw involved, but I think it does the luck of the draw in a way that tends to work, which is that there's so many different possible combinations that work that if you know what you're doing, you should be able to find something that will make the cards that you get actually work over time. And I think this would be true if I had any idea how to play it well. I'm generally fairly good at my games. I'm generally fairly good at the games in my top 100, but this is the exception. My wife just beats me at it all the time. I think I've warmed up to the game a little bit. I think I used to think it was all right, and it was a game I would be willing to play only because she seemed to like it better than I did, but I think I like it a lot more now. Despite the fact that I haven't actually gotten any better. So that is my number 85 innovation. My number 84 is King Domino, which is down 16 spots. Its weight is a 1 and will play 2 to 4 players, although I tend to play this one again more at 2 players than I do at higher player counts. King Domino is a simple tile-laying game. It might be a game that you would spring on someone who perhaps found Carcassonne a little too difficult to get into, but liked the idea of building something. You don't do it collectively like you do in Carcassonne. You are doing it individually, where everyone has their own little area that they're building. But it still has that I'm making a little kingdom feel to it that I think makes Carcassonne so popular. But this one is just much faster. It's a 15-minute game. Maybe it'll stretch to 20 or 25 minutes if people are a little slow in making their decisions. But there aren't that many decisions to make. So, not that they don't have impact, but I'm just saying that you will get through those decisions eventually, and you should never have to play this for more than 25 minutes at the top. It's just very easy and very quick to play. I find I can play this with a wide variety of people. I can teach this to people who have never played board games in their life. I can pretty much use this as a filler in just about any situation other than exceeding the number of players that the game can accommodate. It also has a sister game that I own called Queen Domino, which essentially feels like they took the basic game and then added an expansion in such a way that they just couldn't physically separate it out into like components that could only go in one game, which is I think why it exists as a standalone game rather than an expansion. But it's very good, and I prefer this version because I think I like the quicker, simpler, more straightforward, faster game than Queen Domino, which can easily go 30 to 45 minutes, just because there's that much more going on. Both games are solid, but I think start with King Domino and then try to feel out if you actually want a more complex, sophisticated game out of it. So that is my number 84, King Domino. My number 83 is Race for the Galaxy, which is new to this list. Its weight is a 6, and its number of players is 2 to 4, although I have only personally played it at 2. I'm just taking Board Game Geek's word on this one, that it works at more players. Race for the Galaxy is a game that so far I have only played online because I've only started to play it since the pandemic. I haven't bought a physical copy for myself yet. I may at some point, given that I'm enjoying it, and I may enjoy it more when you actually factor in the physical tactile element of playing with pieces, which is really important to me. It's a really dense strategy game that does a lot with very few components. Like, it's essentially a deck of cards and a few chips, and that's pretty much all there is to the game. And then you just track your points, and you wait until one of the endgame conditions is tracked. It's a game in which you pick a phase out of 5-ish possible phases that you can pick. Some of them have like a 1A and 1B version to them. And you do that phase, but so does every other player. and you will get a bonus for being the one that selected that. But do you really want to do it if it's also going to benefit the other person, if they're going to be able to get something really good out of what you just selected? And that's sort of where the strategy comes in. There's also a few different ways to go about trying to win it. I'm still exploring them, but I do enjoy it. I think I have trouble adjusting to the tighter pace of the game because I'm used to playing games that take upwards of an hour and a half to play. And in games that are paced like that, you have a lot more time to kind of like build your engine and then start cranking out points as you get towards the end. This one you really don't. You only have so many rounds, and the end might come faster than you expect, even if you're the one triggering it. So it's a really interesting game that I think captures the race element of the title very well. It is very much a race to get your engine running, whichever engine you end up going with, up and running and faster and better than other people. So that is my number 83, Race for the Galaxy. My number 82 is Five Tribes, which is down 10 spots on my list. Its weight is about a 6 and plays 2 to 4 players. Now, Five Tribes is a game that I've sort of gone up and down on. I cooled on it, and then I sort of warmed to it a little bit. I've had thoughts of, is it really one of my favorite strategy games? And then I've sort of come back with, no, I really think I like it. I just don't play it that often. It's a game that I received for my birthday relatively early on. I think this would have been in 2015 or 2016, which was close to its release. And it is still, despite the fact that it sits this low on my list, is one of my most memorable board game gifts that I've received. And I'm just glad I have it. I haven't talked a lot about the theme of this top 10 being exotic themes, but the Arabian Nights theme of this one is fairly unique in board gaming. It doesn't get used that often, and it makes for some really charming artwork on the cover and on the cards and so on. I have the old controversial version, which has slaves that you trade in, which is not great thematically. They changed it to something else in a later edition, but if you're pro-slavery, I guess we can play this game. I don't know. I never looked into whether or not I could trade it in because I didn't feel like the theme was strong enough that I really felt like I was trading away those human slaves. It was just like a card that you turned in for other cards. That said, the rest of the game is really cool. It's essentially a Mancala mechanism where you are picking pieces up, and instead of going in like a one-dimensional loop, as you do in the version of Mancala that I'm familiar with, you can basically move it in different directions, and you drop things off along the way, which can affect the layout of the board for other players. And then it's where you drop that last one that really affects what you can do. So the spot where you drop it, what that place does, and what the color you drop it on, what that does, are going to affect what you do on your turn. There's also an interesting bidding mechanism where you can bid potentially a lot of points just to go first, or end up going second because someone outbids you. It's really cool. I just don't have like the one outstanding element, and I think it's probably a little bit lower on my list, mainly because it's more tactical than strategic. I tend to prefer games that have a plan that you can follow through the entire 2 or 3 hour arc of what you're doing, and this one is more like you make moves based on what becomes available to you based on what other players are doing on their turn, and as a result it can lead to some fairly long downtime because you can't even necessarily start thinking about what you want to do until it's your turn. But those complaints aside, it's still a really solid game, and I'm really happy to have it. It's a game I think I want to get back to the table and play at some point. I don't know if Amanda's going to play it with me, but oh well. Anyways, that is my number 82, Five Tribes. Ironically, plays only 4 players without the expansions. Forgot to show you 5 Tribes. Yes, look at it in all of its glory. That is a nice cover, isn't it? And rounding out my list of 10 this time is my number 81, Blood Rage, which is down 27 spots, has a weight of about 6, and plays 2 to 4 players, although it is a little weaker at 2. Blood Rage is arguably one of the best games ever designed, but it's also a combat-heavy game themed around fantasy Vikings trying to destroy each other for glory at the end of the world. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm not even saying I don't appreciate it. I'm just saying, like, I'm the guy who plays games about farming and trading in 17th century Spain. So, this is not my normal style of game, but I still really like it. It has Euro elements that are fairly distinct, especially the card drafting, which is very crucial to playing the game well. The game can swing wildly from one game to the next in terms of someone just gets a combo going that you didn't expect and just mops the floor with you as a result. Or, you know, you can not be counting on a player to be doing something that just upsets your momentum as a result. It is very good. It is fairly long, but not atrociously so. And it's the kind of game that I can only really get to play when I have more people over. So it's a game I really like. I think I'll keep it in my collection because I need some games of this type in my collection, because what am I going to do if I have a bunch of Ameritrash gamers come over sometime and I'm like, who wants to play some Vital Lacerda? No, that's not going to work. So I need something like Blood Rage in my collection, and this is the game in sort of that category that I tend to really like. So I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy to put it on my top 100. It's just not going to go anywhere near my top 25 or 50 anytime soon. So that is my number 81, Blood Rage. Goodness gracious me, I keep forgetting. This is Blood Rage. Yeah, look at that. You can feel the rage emanating from it, can't you? So that was my 81 through 90 games on my top 100 board games list. I didn't really talk about the theme of exotic themes this time very much on each of the entries, but I want to mention Aeon's End has a sort of post-apocalyptic mages fighting nightmarish monsters theme, which is kind of cool. I did talk a little bit about Euphoria's 1984 with a slightly, perhaps more comic tone. Innovation may be a little conventional, but the idea of spanning the entirety of human history, including into the near future, is actually kind of cool. Race for the Galaxy may be a standard sci-fi theme, but I think it works for the game. 5 Tribes is an interesting theme, as I mentioned, and Blood Rage is like you're getting monsters to fight other monsters at Ragnarok as Vikings, and yeah. And Dixit just looks cool. It doesn't have a specific theme, but you could almost imagine themes coming out of just the hand of cards that you're given any particular game of Dixit. So that is my 90 through 81. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you will tune in next time for my 71 through 80. See you then.